Wayne Hayes, our correspondent in Tokyo, who's been watching this. And Wayne, this was a very, very stylised, ritualised ceremony, wasn't it? Everything, down to the last bow, was formal.
Yes, exactly, Martine, and you may say in true Japanese fashion, in fact, as you mentioned, an extremely brief ceremony lasting just 10 minutes or so inside a room in the Imperial Palace. Just as well it was indoors because it's extremely miserable conditions this evening in the Japanese capital. Still, some people have surrounded the palace to try to get a glimpse of some of the VIPs, including the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who went into the palace to take part in that ceremony, as you mentioned, giving a very short speech formally announcing the abdication of the Emperor Akihito. This was a ceremony that was broadcast right around the country on television. Many people, of course, will be crowding around those TVs, around their devices as well, catching a glimpse of the ceremony, because this hasn't been seen in Japan since 1817. That was the last time that we saw an abdication of an emperor. And to get to this stage, the government of Japan had to pass a law, a special one-off law, to allow for the abdication, because when the Emperor Akihito in 2016 said basically that he wanted to abdicate in that televised address without actually saying the word abdicate, he couldn't do that. He couldn't say that word because it was effectively illegal, because there was no law to allow for the abdication. But there you have it, after a short ceremony, the end of Emperor Akihito's reign.
And remind us, Wayne, why Emperor Akihito volunteered to abdicate.
Well, he said in that speech in 2016, it was a very surprise announcement that was televised in Japan from the emperor, that because of his advancing age, because of his deteriorating health, that he felt that he couldn't carry out his duties as emperor for much longer to the best of his ability. So he wanted to carry out a much quieter life. As I say, he couldn't say, I want to abdicate, because it was effectively illegal. But he was sending a very clear message to this government that that was exactly what he wanted to do. He can't just abdicate, like I say. That has to come from government, has to come from parliament. After he made that announcement, opinion polls were very clear from the Japanese public that they supported this. He has been a very popular emperor. They believe he's carried out his duties very well. He has brought a common touch to the position of emperor and also to the imperial family. So for that reason, there was a lot of support for allowing him to retire and spend the rest of his years in a much quieter lifestyle. So from that moment, the government really had no choice but to pass a one-off law allowing for the abdication, even though there was some opposition from some people, some conservative elements from within Japanese society and from within conservative elements within the government itself. They really had no choice. They had to listen to the people. They had to listen to the emperor himself and the rest of the imperial family and pass that law.
And his 30-year reign, as Shinzo Abe pointed out, has seen a huge amount of prosperity for Japan, but also he has overseen some of the worst natural disasters.
It's been a very difficult time for him, there is no doubt, from the moment that he took over in 1989 after the death of his father, Emperor Hirohito. Hirohito waged war, let's not forget. And I think that during the reign of Akihito, he felt obliged, really, to spend a lot of his time trying to make amends for Japanese actions during World War II. And that is something that he did. He had to walk a very careful line, though, in that regard, because the position of emperor since 1947 is a symbolic one. He has no political power, so he had to be very careful in what he was saying about Japan's actions during wartime. But he did express remorse on many occasions. And then, as you mentioned, there were many large natural disasters in Japan during his reign. And I think he made a very special effort to display that common touch that he wanted to throughout his reign. You know, he was down on his knees talking to some of the survivors of natural disasters, particularly after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami struck areas along the coastline in Japan, he was seen inside some of those evacuation centres on his knees talking to common people, if you like, about some of their problems in the wake of that disaster. Now, that may seem like a natural thing for a community leader to do, but Japanese people had never seen that before from their emperor. So he was really the first one to do that. Again, those conservative elements within Japanese society weren't very keen on that. They believed that the emperor should be someone special. He should not be on the same level as common people, for want of a better term, in Japan, that he should spend more time inside the palace focusing on traditions, focusing on the ceremonial duties of the emperor rather than trying to win the support of the people. But apparently Emperor Akihito didn't care about those concerns, and he really wanted to, like I say, bring a common touch to the role of emperor and to the family itself.
Wayne, thank you very much. Wayne Hay is our man outside the Imperial Palace in Tokyo in the rain. That's Wayne Hay. Let's now talk to Nancy Snow, who's Professor of Public Diplomacy at Kyoto University of Foreign Studies. And she's also in Tokyo, but thankfully inside Nancy. We talked a little bit then about the reign of Akihito, and it's the chrysanthemum throne. So does Naruhito, the son, now inherit the chrysanthemum throne, or is it a new era completely?
Well, the son has said that he would continue the progressive reign of his father. We have so many questions, though, going forward. Will the son actually expand on his interest in the environment? Some have speculated that perhaps he will get involved in climate change. You know, Japan is a great supporter of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I could see this new emperor actually shepherding that along because, as I was saying in the earlier segment, Japan is at a unique location in that they're dealing with a lot of problems that are going to come around the corner in other countries. So as a global leader, as the world's third largest economy, as really a cultural superpower, and having this blanket of protection, if you will, of this peace and security under the United States, then they can delve into other areas, social welfare areas, the aging society, robotics, artificial intelligence. There's so much that Japan has given the world that has been very useful and has had utilitarian value. In fact, the three sacred treasures of Japan that we saw symbolically being carried there is also a metaphor for durable goods that have been referenced throughout Japan's post-war miracle, having to do with automobiles and creating products that have value over time.
Right.
So I really am hopeful that this new emperor, will get involved in those issues.
Right, because this is a particular juncture in time, isn't it, for Japan, where modernity is infringing upon tradition. We've seen Shinzo Abe making his speech at this deeply traditional ceremony, but that we know that he wants to move Japan on. He wants to seize some of Japan's sovereignty, if you like, to break away from the yoke of American control, to break away from the pacifist constitution. So this is a moment of great change, one suspects.
Well, you could even see it played out with the prime minister addressing the emperor and empress, and then with the emperor addressing the top members of the cabinet of the prime minister. Abe has a different frame, if you will, which is about changing, updating, normalizing relations with the world, it's a lot of coded speech for giving a more assertive military profile for Japan. And yet this imperial family has represented that continuity of peace that we've seen in 70-plus years. And the emperor made it clear in his brief remarks to continue peace and tranquility. And that is the most valued nation brand value in Japan. It is like the highest virtue. When I ask my students about this, what do you represent to the world? They will say we are a peaceful country. so peaceful, and even in Reiwa, which is about beautiful harmony. Wa is widely spoken around here, that creating social harmony, but also harmonious relations with the world. So I think we're going to have a little bit of a kind of a rocky path ahead in deciding, are we going to go with this agenda of the Abe administration? He may have to pull back on that, because the next 2 years will be more about the international celebration of athletics and also bringing the world's top economies here. So it won't be so much about updating the security arrangement that has been put upon Japan in its constitution.
Right.
Wayne mentioned the conservative elements in Japanese society, and they are definitely putting more of a pressure on Abe. So he's got to deal with both sides here.
Nancy Snow, thank you very much indeed for giving us that analysis after this historic event. There, we're looking at the pictures again. Just a short while ago, this was the formal abdication of Emperor Akihito. And he does remain Emperor of Japan, actually until midnight. And it's not until in the morning that his son, his eldest son, Naruhito, will start the rituals which in turn will allow him to ascend officially, formally, to the throne. So the very latest pictures there from Japan on this historic day.